Man, oh man, we're talking albums. We're taking it old school today.
Albums. What's an album?
It's a laser disc that's black.
Oh my gosh.
And you put it inside of a giant microwave type machine.
No.
And it spins.
Ridiculous.
No, but we're talking about back and albums are kind of coming back again. Not just like the physical format albums, but actual, even digital content.
Collection of songs.
It's like it wasn't a thing for like 10 years.
Not a single.
Yeah, it was just singles and EPs and people like that's all. But now like the album is like, because we were talking to the young cats that work in the shop, like the 20-year-old people. That's the young people. And they listen to albums a lot and listen to like full things. And then it got us thinking like albums that changed our lives and albums that maybe made you fall out of love with a band too sometimes.
Sometimes it happens.
Ones that are like, oh, I don't know if I like this anymore.
Right.
Or this artist, like I got to sort of reconnect. So, like, what about you? What's one that was like a pivotal, in your formation of an artist?
So there's a couple, and it's funny because the two that I first think about, like sitting in my room listening to them, neither of them are actual real albums. Like one was the greatest hits, the Eagles,
okay.
Like because I just got that and I was like, whoa, because it was right around the time I started playing guitar. And then the other one, this actually is more of an album, but it was live. This 24 Nights.
Oh,
I just listened to that.
How old would you have been like that? You would have been like were you a teenager when that?
Yeah, I was when I got a hold of it, it was, it had been out, but I was like, 17, 16.
Because I remember that is an amazing record.
And you've talked about it before, but I remember just
being
flabbergasted.
Well, because we've talked about Cloud before. He's in and out of like popular and stuff. Like we all still love his music. Right. It's like it's the stuff, and like and that album is groundbreaking. And that when you go back to Journeyman, even from the '90s, was I think a groundbreaking pop sort of crossover blues. I think you got Nathan East on bass and Nathan East is on Clapton's new Unplugged record coming out.
There you go.
There's a live acoustic record coming out, and I heard some tracks from it. It's frustratingly good.
Okay.
So I was like, this is going to be he still got it. That voice is like, it's gotten better almost.
I think his voice has aged amazingly.
There's this weird thing to it, and it's sort of, anyway, that's enough of that. So Clapton and the Eagles.
Those were just the first two that I remember, like, spending time with the album. Like, it wasn't I wanted to hear this song. No, I wanted to have the whole experience. I remember getting one of those horrible the CD changer things for Christmas with the little speakers you could like get detach, and then you put them together and it was still a boombox. And I just remember sitting in my room, man, and just listening.
As you did your arms like that, I was just thinking, man, that'd be a big bird. That's what I was thinking.
Such a large bird.
Look at the length of his arms.
Good Lord.
That's how big your bird person is. Or something I saw at the zoo. I don't know.
Yeah.
Now the album
Wingspan.
The album that changed my life. This is not an album most people have heard probably. It was called Penthouse by Luna.
Okay.
And it's a New York City type bass rock band. They were Galaxy 500 before, based out of Boston, I believe. But it's Dean Wareham and like just a wonderful. But I was like going down a different path where I'd sort of fallen out of love with rock and roll. Because this is I love all the classic stuff.
Sure.
But I heard that record. And it sort of brought me back to that rock and roll didn't have to be what I thought it had to be. It could be something entirely different. And this guy, when I saw him perform live, which I saw many times, it was a different definition for what a rock star could be too. And they never became huge mainstream, but they're still out there. I feel like they're touring in support of somebody really big now. I don't know if it was Pavement or whatever. That's another Slain and Enchanted, also changed my life. But that Luna, the Penthouse by Luna is one of the. It's always in the Rolling Stone magazines, like top 100 albums you've never heard that you have to hear, and it's like you need to hear this record. Like most people have never heard it, and when I heard it, because like I love the Velvet Underground, I love Lou Reed, and I love all this stuff. But like they somehow encapsulated all that mixed with indie rock cool.
Yeah.
And the guy just stood there on stage, didn't move an inch, and would just sing his songs and play his guitar, and he looked like just a rock star. He's this little skinny weird guy that wears funny tennis shoes.
It's funny. What? They're
It's
So you're talking about 3 underground albums that you've never heard, right? There were probably 3 for me that are not cool now at all. But
they changed your life?
But they definitely, because they were just such good songs and I could listen to the whole album.
What was it?
So it was Matchbox 20's first album, Yourself and Someone Like You.
Yep.
The Wallflowers at the same time. And then that first Counting Crows record. I would just listen to those 3.
I'm gonna go on a limb. I don't like any of those records.
You hate them all, but for me, they
I know
came
they're good. I know they're really good. It's just, it's the right time in your life.
That is what sort of pointed me to Tom Petty.
Really?
Yep.
That's how you got pointed to Tom Petty?
Because I heard the guy, Rob Thomas from Matchbox 20, talk about how like his goal was sort of to write songs like that, just to be an amazing song where like every song you write, it's a hit. It could be a single. And I was like, oh, Tom Petty. And I was like, oh yeah, I know Free Fallin'. And then I started going to listen. But it's funny because like there was so much
funny.
Tom Petty stuff at the time. I don't know that I listened to the albums at first in the same way.
I mean, that
I would just
solo
listen to the
Tom
songs.
Petty record, that you know,
Full of Favor. Yeah.
that thing did change my life.
Yeah,
it was
great.
that's when I was first introduced to Tom Petty as a young person too. I was like, oh, this is the greatest record ever. Another one of that time, Appetite for Destruction.
Yeah.
Game changer for me.
It was, I mean, yeah.
Like when I remember like this, and this was with my next door neighbor, Brian Cox. He's like a nice financial guy or something, has a nice family, he's pretty sweet.
A real person.
He was a bad person. Like we all were when we were kids. We were just like rock and roll wannabe kids. It was great. Like he was just crazy. He was punk and fun, and like he was just the best soccer player at the school, and just like cool and good looking. But he listened to really good music. And we'd always go to his house. We had his dad buy us that record. We didn't tell him it was a bad record. We're like listening to Mr. Brownstone. We got in so much trouble later. But then that record, and then some of the early Doors stuff. We used to always listen up in his room with the lights off. Let your imagination go. You know, that's just what the guy just sitting there, like, you know, with the funny lights on, just like the riders on the storm, and like these things changed my life. I was like, wow, it was amazing. And then you jump further. I would also say Smashing Pumpkins, Siamese, like that record.
That was a big record for me too.
That was a game changer in my life. And then
I had this cousin, like thinking about the Guns N' Roses thing, who lived down this dirt road, right? And he was older than me. And I was a little kid, but I would, you know, I could sort of walk back there from my grandparents, and he'd be listening to that Pantera record with Cowboys from Hell on it, and I would just be like losing my mind. I was like, "What is happening? I don't know, but I think I like it." And it was just
well, that's Metallica and Justice for All did me too. That was my first sort of taste of metal.
You're like, oh,
and then it sort of brought me back to the earlier
Right.
metal. But that when I heard that, like. And I had my parents buy me like the Tab book. That was like $17 back in the freaking 90s, which is a lot of money.
I think you still have that
I
around
still
here
have it.
somewhere.
It's in the bathroom.
Yeah.
I think it's hilarious. I never get rid of it. But I mean, like that record was like, I was like, it's still godly to me in certain ways. It's my favorite Metallica record, even though I know like some might be better. Like this one sells more. This one's like more metal. That one's the one that hit me at that time of my youth, and that's what it came back to. We're talking to Sean, who's younger than both of us, and we're talking about how albums can change your life, and there's so many, like the I just went blank on the one I was just talking about, the band like Float On. It's his
Modest Mouse.
Modest Mouse. That
Modest
record
Mouse.
was a game changer for me too. I just went blank. Sorry, that's how much it changed my life. I have early Alzheimer's, but that, you know, like at that time when you're in your young 20s and you're listening to this stuff, and like I was on my headphones on my CD Walkman walking through New York City. You know, this is back down the. I remember listening to that record after the towers went down, walking all through the financial district, going to my friend's apartment who lived at 99 John. Anybody lives at 99 John Street? Cool apartment, massive place. God, those were views. They were giving those apartments away then because like nobody wanted to live in the financial district after that. But I remember those, and that record just being such a part of my life. And like the Secret Machines, the Walkman, like all that stuff, like the first Yeah Yeah Yeahs EP, and the first Strokes record, that changed all of our lives in New York City. But
that is funny because it's almost like that point in a person's life when they're like, you know, late teens through your 20s,
almost to 30.
Probably, yeah.
You can consume music voraciously,
Right.
and you don't have kids.
And you just right. So you're thinking all these sort of like, you know, these high-minded thoughts
Yes.
of how the universe is, and you know, it just takes like the Counting Crows thing. You know, that's probably not going to go down as like but it just, you connect to those things. And
I will say
change
that
your
Third
life.
Eye Blind record is one of the greatest.
That was a great record.
That's
too.
one we listened to that on the road trip the other day, and that was
Can
one.
I graduate? Yeah,
That whole record's phenomenal. And the Wallflowers record is really, I'll give you that one. That one's really, really good.
Then the next, I didn't like any of the other.
Or the one that I know you don't like this one, but I remember like the first Black Crowes records came out. Those were unreal because like no one was doing classic rock in the 90s
No, it
like
was
that.
awesome. Yeah.
And it was like, but I remember I said, oh my God, this is so cool. Because like, you know, the ones that really changed my life that were sort of glancing over, like when I first heard Hendrix, when I first heard Zeppelin, when I first heard Clapton, when I first heard Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Well, those are the ones that, right.
That's what made us guitar
yes,
players.
of course.
But then like these other ones, like, you know, Luna Penthouse and Slanted and Shannon by Pavement, and like when you first hear like some of Beck's weird stuff, like Sea Changes. Sea Changes affected me dramatically.
Right.
Like then Midnight Vultures, I'm like, whoa, he can do that. But no, like when you're in your 20s though, it's like it's all about like this consumption, your headphones, you're consuming it a different way. Like when you get older, it's harder to do that. It's but then everyone that shop knows I always try to listen to new music because I'm so passionate about it. And like,
whereas I not so much.
No, but I'll infect you guys with like some terrible pop. Because like when I first heard the Kid Leroy, I was like, man, this stuff is amazing. It's so much fun. Like, I mean, and he has the worst dance move ever. Be like, why hasn't this become a thing? Because his dancing looks ridiculous.
It kind of does.
But I mean, wake up. He's like grabbing his crotch, like moving his feet. Like it's like what any white guy does at a dance, and it looks terrible. And then Justin Bieber stands up next to him and shows you how it's done.
Right.
But it's I love new music, but I still go back to those. Like if Luna's Penthouse comes on, or like if Black Crowes and that early stuff comes on, you're like,
it's amazing.
Yeah.
Have you heard that new band that's opening for Black Crowes right now?
No.
Dirty Honey.
Oh, I've heard of Dirty Honey. Yeah. Are they good?
They're pretty darn good.
Yeah, I've heard of them. I don't know if I've actually listened.
And everyone I know who has gone to see them on this tour so far has said that they were fantastic.
And then we briefly glanced at are there records that have like sort of turned you off of the band?
I know people talk about this. Usually if that happens for me, I just I forget it exists. Like you said, it's not canon.
I know.
But I mean, like Metallica is a good example, right? I think there's a couple points where, their fans, certain albums.
That was Load, right? That sort of like
Load, or
or the Black Album, turned off a lot of like the hardcore, like early. But we looked at this whole list of like albums, like we were going through it ourselves too. It tended to be in the metal world.
I feel like that happens more there. That whole idea of like a sellout or like a
flick of the switch,
going to poppy is a thing where
and punk too. It's like the whole idea of punk is not to be mainstream, and the whole idea of metal is not to be mainstream, and then
because that's sort of a lifestyle, right? Like punk, you are punk, right? It's not that you make punk music, you are punk. And if you are metal, you are you are a metalhead, right?
And I was a huge Smashing Pumpkins fan, and then Adore came out, and a lot of people were like, I hate Adore. Like, I actually like Adore. Right. But it is totally different, and I respect an artist trying to do something different. They can't just do the same grind out every time. It's boring.
It's true.
You gotta keep spinning the wheels and trying to make something different.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So for us, there's really never been one that's been like, wow.
I mean, there are definitely artists. For me, what usually happens is there's a record that I just fall in love with, and then the next two records I'm so excited, or next record or whatever, and then they just don't live up to the one that I feel like is their pinnacle. So, but it doesn't make me not a fan of them anymore, right? It just makes me, I'm probably going to go back and listen to that old record more. And sometimes after a while, I do find songs in those newer ones that
Well, and it is also, I think it's a time when you hear it.
That
album sort of bonds it with you, kind of like Jacob did in Twilight with the when you bond with someone.
No.
Anyway, that's my only movie reference for the whole day.
Or like Hotel Transylvania when they zing.
I've never seen that.
They're all great. My kids watch them every day.
Stop. No more movie talk. We're not allowed to do
sorry,
it. We're
sorry.
not do it today.
That's right.
We don't want to upset anybody if we talk about movies. But I don't care if we upset anybody about talking about movies.
We've never upset anyone.
No.
People just love us.
Talk to my wife. What was I thinking? I lost what I was thinking now.
Dang it.
There was a good one, then we got distracted.
Like when they bond, you bond. It's a time. It's a moment in time.
No, which album was it? Oh, I can't remember. It's not important enough.
Dang it.
It was a good point, though, but we got going too far, and the rabbit hole sucked me in. It's just going to drive me nuts. I'm going to think about it all day. I won't. But let us know your experience with like a record that really meant the world to you, or one that turned you off. But mostly, like, I want to hear about I love when people like share like stories, because we learn a lot from reading the comments. We try to respond to them all if we can. It takes a while for us to get to somehow hundreds to thousands sometimes.
And do like we did. Tell us your weird ones. Like we know, Led Zeppelin. We know, with the first time you heard Axis Bows Love. Awesome. Yes, of course. Tell us the odd ones, or the ones that maybe you're like, well, I know this is a real weird guilty pleasure, but it changed my life. Yeah, whatever. That's what we want to hear about. Discuss. Be nice to each other. Is that it?
That's it. I'm done.
Don't forget to hit that like button, hit subscribe if you have not already, click the bell so you don't miss things in the future. We'll see you at Merlefest if you make it. Otherwise, have a fantastic week. See you next time.